Arkansas edge rusher, defensive lineman Landon Jackson gets put underneath the prospect spotlight with a big-time matchup against Ole Miss this weekend for Week 10 of college football. How can he help his draft stock? We'll discuss this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. And you know, I got to kick the intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at The Talent Code. You talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man, and the other side to this dynamic duel that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Every listen is greatly appreciated here over at Locked On NFL Draft. Today's show, we're going with Prospect Spotlight. We're taking the spotlight. We're highlighting a prospect, right? We're going to talk about that guy, what he needs to do, right, what he could do, and just how he's performing thus far in regards to his 2025 NFL draft stock, right? And then we're going to talk about who is edge one. And I feel like you could potentially ask 5 different people. You're going to get 5 different answers, right, with that question. So me and DP are going to have that conversation, and then we're going to have the conversation of, is the interior defensive line class underrated? Is this a position group that nobody's talking about that can produce a lot of first rounders, right? You've seen Jerzon Newton make some big time plays for the Washington Commanders this past Sunday. Do we have a couple of those guys in this draft class? DP, let's get into this prospect spotlight segment.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Keith, now think about shining a prospect spotlight. For me, I feel this is going to be a defensive line heavy, podcast for me, Keith, because I'm going to the trenches and I'm going to Arkansas. When Arkansas hosts Ole Miss this weekend, this Saturday, right? You got Jackson Dart, Juice Wells. Hopefully Trey Harris is back healthy and everything. I'm putting the spotlight on Landon Jackson, Keith. I think he is going to be very, very important for Arkansas, right? I think Arkansas is, like, we know that Ole Miss has a pretty good defense, right? But I think Arkansas can have success, right? You got to get, whether it's Jaquindon Jackson or Braylon Russell, the freshman who's like 250 pounds, who had 175 yards rushing last weekend. No matter who's in the backfield, I think they're going to be able to run the ball, and that's going to be a key for them, is to run the ball, right? Keep Princely, Millen, Jared Ivey, and then I think Walter Nolan, keep those guys out of the backfield. But it's going to be the defense, right? Getting after Jackson Dart. What do we know about Jackson Dart, Keith? If you give him time, if he's sitting in the pocket, he can read the defense. And, of course, Lane Kiffin's scheme makes things easy for him to read. Keith, if he's just sitting back there with no pressure, he's going to feel comfortable, right? He's going to be back there able to bake a cake, make a Sunday dinner, and still dish out the rock. You can't let that happen. And Landon Jackson is going to be a big part of, like, basically stopping that. The 6'7", 280-pound defensive end, has 3 sacks on the season. He has a fumble force on the season, 5 QB hits and 16 pressures. And he's coming off a game last week against Mississippi State where he had the sack in that game, and that forced fumble I alluded to, he had that as well. But I think for him, he plays the run well. He understands how to use his frame, his arm length for leveraging, things like that to set the edge. Now get back there. And I'm not, like, last year, like I think we talked about this a couple of times with Landon. Everybody had him as a first-round pick coming off of the summer because of the production he had last year, right? Where no, that's not the case this year. He's not closing the sacks as much as he did last year, this year. But being a consistent pressure player is important in the NFL and in football in general, right? Because at the end of the day, maybe you flush him to your interior D-line and he gets sacked. Maybe you flush him to your backside, your opposite edge rusher, and Jackson Dart gets uncomfortable. Whatever the case may be, you want him to hear your footsteps and they're probably big footsteps because you're 6'7", 280 pounds. You want him to hit those footsteps all game. I need to see something from Landon Jackson this coming Saturday.
Yeah, DP, I think that's a good call out because that can be another addition, right? When we talk about to the and I'm gonna say the IDL class because I think he's one of those hybrid, like
Tweeners.
like tweener type guys, and he reminds me a lot of Tyree Wilson. And the thing is that Tyree Wilson kind of name, right, and it lasted all the way to the draft, right? He wound up being a top 10 pick. But I always, and we've had these conversations, DP, I've always felt like Tyree Wilson was more of a second round guy just because I didn't know if he had the bend and athleticism to consistently thread around the edge.
Yeah.
Right? If he had the first step explosiveness to continue to do it, but he had the power and the strength. So I'm looking at this guy and saying, hey, he's more of a kick him inside, right? Maybe he play outside on first, second down, kick him inside, right? Let him rush as an IDL. And I see the same thing for Landon Jackson. DP, my guy that I'm rolling with, you talking about prospect spotlight. I'm going with Abdul Carter, DP. I'm picking an edge rusher too. I'm going with Abdul Carter. They have a big time matchup against Penn State, right? And I think coming into the season and probably how we feel at this moment, right, is that, hey, if you had to pick who's the better edge rusher out of these guys, you're probably like out of Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Danny Dennis Sutton, right? Abdul Carter, right? Like coming out of the summer, Abdul Carter was that guy. And it's like, hey, you have a big time matchup. Go ahead, take over the game, right? Do some big time things, and then just take over this game and show everybody why you're I guess you could say slated to be potential at this point, top 20 pick, right? Safe to say top 20 pick, and you're going in that class. So I'm picking Abdul Carter.
I like that too, Keith. This is going to be a D-line heavy pod, guys. So I'm telling you now, just buckle up, strap in, right? Like with Abdul Carter, Keith, and it's crazy because watching him, it looks like a guy who played off-ball backer last year, who's still figuring it out to play defensive end. And I know last week against Wisconsin, the main thing for him, and this is why I think he's going to be this to me, I think he's going to be more Micah Parsons, than a true edge early, is because of the growing pains, like setting the edge and dealing with the run game, where where he was more so playing the run last year off the second level, right? Striking offensive linemen with 2-3 yards of takeoff, right? And of a runway, rather than trying to just fire off the ball, get your hands engaged, lock guys out. Now you got to, shed guys, right? So I think that's going to be a big thing for him. That's why that Micah Parsons type of comp is going to be prevalent, because I think teams are probably going to look at him as one of those hybrids where it's like, you know what? I can use you as a third down rusher, but a first and second down linebacker, unless through camp, you see him developing, getting stronger at the point of attack. And you say, okay, maybe we let you live at the edge rush position. Because I think he's like, right now, in terms of like his weight and size, I think he is up to he's like 250 right now. 6'3", 250 is what he's listed as right now. So on the season, 4 sacks. He's got 3 QB hits, 14 pressures. His pass rush win rate is 15.2. He's got a batted pass at the line of scrimmage. So he's been doing some good things. And on those true pass sets, this is like it varies, right? Because it's one thing to get pressure, trying to get pressure off of those play action passes, but the true pass sets, those true drop back sets, his pass rush win rate goes up from 15.2 to 22.2. So it's like, hey, it's third down, and the quarterback's dropping back to throw. Oh yeah, he's effective. He's getting back there. He's making his presence felt. So it's going to be interesting, Keith. And I think this Ohio State game is going to be. I would have loved for Josh Simmons to be healthy, because this would have been a resume game for both. But with Josh Simmons not being there, Abdul, can you take over this game? Can you take over and beat the backup left tackle like a drum from Drumline? Can you Nick Cannon him the entire game and make Will Howard uncomfortable? Now, granted, Will Howard's athletic, so he can get out of the pocket. So you got to be wary of that too. But I like the call out, Keith. It's going to be a big game for him against a loaded offensive team that is Ohio State. Especially if you don't have Drew Aller, like you're gonna need your defense to do some things.
Yeah, they're gonna have to step up, right? But DP, let's keep this thing going and flowing, man. We've talked about 2 edge rushers thus far, right? And now we're going to talk about who is edge one in this draft class, right? Thus far, who do we have as edge one? And we didn't have this conversation before this segment. So this is going to be interesting for both of us to see who we slate as edge rusher one in this draft class. We'll have this conversation coming up next.
Our friends at 5 Hour Energy knows that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5-Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like you, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5-Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5-Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. Who is edge one right now going into week 10 of college football season for the 2025 NFL draft class? Keith, this is, for me, I'm going to go with the young kid, the 20-year-old, SEC, 6'4", 285-pound Nick Scourton. I'm taking Nick, man. Just watching him, coming off the game he had against LSU for one, where he had six hurries and pressures, a sack in that game. For me, with Nick Scourton being 6'4", 285, what I appreciate with him and him being so young in that game, he had his pass rush win rate was 19%. He was second on the team overall, but his true drop back pass rush win rate jumped to 26.7, almost 27%. So you talk about a guy that was getting in the backfield time and time again, and he's got the power, he's got the first step quickness, he's really agile for 285 pounds. The spin move, the movement ability that he brings is just different. You don't expect to see that when you look at his body type. When he walks off the bus, you're like, all right, speed to power, first step quickness, he's gonna try to bull rush me every play. And it's like, yeah, not exactly. Like, you got to really look for those agile moves, the dip, bend, the inside, outside spin counters, things of that nature. And what I love about Nick Scourton, he's still only scratching the surface as a young player, because from a hand technique standpoint, he's still learning how to use his hands to set blockers up. And you think about having that ability to convert speed to power, to have that first step quickness, to sell the outside rush, have a spin count, already having a spin in your bag as early as he has, like, that's key, because now you have always that trump card as a counter, where if you're trying to sell that outside rush, but hey, listen, that tackle's athletic as well, but he's so athletic, he done jumped out the blocks too early, and now I can spin back inside, and now I'm right into the face of the quarterback. I think his ceiling is high. I think, it's a sky is the limit type situation for him. And again, teams that want to bolster their pass rush, like, yeah, I would take him in the first round. Like, I think that you look at it, you see that he's only scratching the surface. And he plays the run. Unlike, I think, with James Pierce, the question is going to be functional strength at the point of attack, playing the run. Abdul Carter, same thing. I don't see that problem with Nick Scourton. I think he plays the run well when you're running at him, but also he's a guy, Keith, that you don't want to run away from. When you think about that split flow zone and stuff like that, he blows those plays up because he's so quick off the ball and he identifies it so fast that the backside tight end who's trying to slice and pick him up, they rarely ever get to him because he's able to just beat them off the ball. So I think Nick Scourton is my top edge rusher right now.
Yeah, DP, and I think that's you're talking about a guy that's ascending, right? Like, just keep with the arrow pointing up. And what I like about Nick is that he's showing up in the big time games, right? Week 1 against Notre Dame, he had a sack, right? They had a close game against Arkansas, he had 2 sacks, right? Then you talk about the big time showdown with LSU, right? He showed up again with a sack or half a sack, however they want to record it. So he's showing up in big moments also. And honestly, when you look across the board, it's probably been the most consistent of the edge rushers in this class, outside of the guys that have kind of, like that are emerging. When I talk about like the Donovan Iziriku from Boston College, and then what is it, Antoine Powell Ryland,
Yep.
trying to make sure I say that right. Like those guys had the production, but I think they're still emerging as guys in this draft class. DP, I'm gonna go with another SEC edge rusher. I'm just doubling down and, like, you know what, pushing all my chips in the middle of the table. I'm going with Jalen Walker. We've seen what he can do against Texas, right? And I know the conversation is going to be that he's a hybrid guy. Well, I can't help the fact if I look at it and I see everything that translates to him being a good edge rusher in the class, right? And we talked about Micah Parsons. It's the same exact conversation, right? Like that. Now that Micah Parsons has moved to edge, or he rushes the quarterback, it's not crazy to say that Micah Parsons is one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, right? But I feel like coming out of Penn State, DP, if we'd have said, "Oh, I think Micah Parsons is gonna be the best edge rusher," it wouldn't have come off well, because everybody was like, "What do you mean? He's a linebacker, right?" But you get what I'm saying? Like just that tone, right? It was like, no, he got drafted as a linebacker. He can't be the best edge rusher if he's a linebacker. I think that was the tone back then, and even with the Cowboys, right? It took them 3 years to figure out that he was the best edge rusher. And so I look at it with Jalen Walker. I just the first step explosiveness. I just think he is another one of those product of Georgia, to where they do so much that they don't hone in on one specific situation, right? And so that, like, they're not always able maybe to play in their best position because they do so many different things, right? And I think if you got 100% Jalen Walker lining up on the edge, you would maybe have some concerns in the run game, right? Because he's listed at 6'2", 240, but I think his sack production would be higher. Because he would just have more reps getting after it. So Jalen Walker for me would be my edge one in this class, but I'm gonna leave it off as this. This is a fluid situation, DP. It's a fluid situation.
No, I mean, listen, Jalen Walker is one of the best defenders in this class, right? Like overall, and even on the season, right? He's been disruptive consistently. 8 pressures, 4 QB hits, 5 sacks, pass rush win rate overall 17.3. 2 drop back sets, true pass rush pressures. His pass rush win rate jumps to 22.7, almost 23%. When you, like you said, if you line him up and just tell him to pin his ears back, oh, he's going to get back there. And I just, like I said, from whether it's Hassan Reddick, Carl Lawson, like there's numerous of sub 6'4", 6'3" edge rushers that have been menaces at the NFL level. And I go back to that Texas game and just watch him against Kelvin Banks. And don't get me wrong, I like some of those sacks that offensive line gave up was on Quinn. But there was reps where Jalen Walker is not just a skill set, Keith, the athleticism, just the power, the counters, the moves. It's the motor. Like this dude is like, we all grew up watching cartoons. He reminds me of the Tasmanian Devil. Like he is absolutely just insane in terms of getting after the quarterback. I remember watching that one rush where he never fit his hands and tried to bull rush Kelvin Banks. He just kept throwing, and it was walking Kelvin back because Kelvin couldn't get his hands fully latched in and set. And I was like, this dude does not stop. Like, so then you look at him at off-ball backer, even go back to the Clemson game, stopping the run on the outside, like stopping the run on the inside. Like, this is a guy where I think we've talked about, not us, but the football community. Last 10 years, they like using the phrase positionless defense, right? Because we see it in basketball where you got centers who can play power forward because they can shoot. And in the NFL, like you got safeties who can play nickel corner. You got some corners who can play safety. You got edge rushers and linebackers who are interchangeable. Jalen Walker is absolutely that. And I think this is a guy that's going to be, I think he's going to finish off with a first round grade for me because of all of the value he brings. So I'm not mad at that being edge one either. And this crazy thing enough, Keith, neither Nick Scourton or Jalen Walker were the consensus favorites for the edge one like title coming off of the summer scouting, coming into the season for everybody. It was Abdul, it was James Pierce, it was those guys. But we got 2 guys that really have ascended themselves to the top of this class.
Yeah, and DP, I'll say this: I'm not surprised, right? And we've talked throughout this, scouting process, right? And just was like, oh, Michael Williams and James Pierce, and we like them, but I was like, I have concerns, right? And not
Yeah.
concerns that they're bad players, just like I don't know if the production is translating. I don't know what's going to go on, and I think that's why you see that. So I'm definitely not surprised. But DP, let's wrap this thing up. And what do we want to wrap it up with? Who is the IDL class underrated, right? We're gonna talk about some of those prospects, the interior defensive linemen, talk about which guys that nobody's talking about, and if this class is just this interior defensive lineman class is underrated overall.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch or an urge in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you placed your bets. All you need to do is just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, your first $5 bet, if you win, will get you $150 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's join, BILT.com/lockedon. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl to start earning points with your rent payments today. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot, for being our everydayers. Keith, the interior defensive line class, it feels like a lot of the discussion, and rightfully so, quarterbacks, right? Everybody wants to talk quarterbacks, right? Receivers. We talked about tight end a lot, and then it's loaded running back class and stuff. And then, the offensive tackle class isn't what we expected it to be. But I think this interior D-line class is underrated, Keith. And I think this is severely underrated. I know at the top, we know Mason Graham and the dude that he is. We know what Mason Graham is, right? But Kenneth Grant, his teammate, the nose tackle, great player. Deion Walker, and I'm gonna get to. I want to say this, Keith. If Deion Walker, if he played the run the way my guy DeMonte Capehart plays the run, Deion Walker would be a top 3 player in this class, bar none. With his pass rush ability, and if he played with the pad level power and surge creation that DeMonte Capehart plays with in the run game, like, yeah, complete player. You got no questions about him. You're like, nah, I'm good. Top 3 player. But Deion Walker in this class, 6'6", 345. Dante Corleone, the 6'1", 320-pound nose tackle from Cincinnati. TJ Sanders that you've talked about numerous times. Tyleik Williams, my guy over at Ohio State, Shamar Turner. And I didn't really know much about this kid, Derek Harmon, until I watched him over at Oregon, 6'5", 310. Yep. The Notre Dame pairing, Riley Mills and Howard Cross III, Aeneas Peoples. But again, as Tonka Hemingway, and then Walter Nolan, for some reason, feels like he just flies under the radar, even though he's such a good player. And again, DeMonte Capehart, I think I don't know how many we see in round 1. I think we probably see three of them in round 1. I think we see Kenneth Grant, Deion Walker, and Mason Graham for sure. I think those 3 end up being because I think the testing. We remember the clip last year of Kenneth Grant running down the Penn State running back down the sideline. Like when he tests, I think he's going to test like a freak athlete at his size. And when you're 340 and if you run 4.7, dear God, runs 4.6, like you're going, you stamp it. You're going round one. I think those three guys are probably shoe-ins. If anybody's going round one out of this class, I think we get a run in round two, Keith. And I think we see it nowadays. If defenses want to play so much too high safety, you got to stop the run, right? You got to stop the run. We watched the Indianapolis Colts. They struggle stopping them. Joe Mixon has dominated them both times he's seen them this year. When teams don't fear like running the ball on you, they know that they can dictate the game and dictate the pace. This interior defensive line class is going to give you a mixture of everything. You can have your run stuffers like DeMonte Capehart. You get your guys like Aeneas Peoples, who's 6'1", 290. That can be more of that 2-3 tech that can rush the passer. I think it's a lot of different flavors in this ice cream shop of interior defensive linemen. I think it's underrated, Keith.
Yeah, and you talk about a run, right? We had one in the 2024 NFL draft, right? In the second round, literally pick 4 in the second round, Jerzon Newton, pick 6, T'Vondre Sweat, pick 7, Braden Fisk, pick 16, Mason Smith, pick 17, Chris Jenkins, pick 22, Michael Hall. So you had that run right in the second round to where I think I just listed off 6 names, I believe, that went in the second round, and they just kind of flew off the board. DP, I think when I look at this, I have a couple statements, right? First of all, to DeMonte Capehart, I think he's a first round talent. In this draft, you asked me the 30 best players. I think he's one of the 32. He's one of the 32 best football players in this draft. And with our rankings over at the Draft Network, right? I don't know how aggressive people have been, but I pounded the table to put him as a top 45 player right now. Like I feel that strongly about what he can do, and he just reminds me of Justin Eborgby that was drafted, Byron Young that was drafted 2 years ago. Just some of these heavy-handed. If Ruka Roa, right, went early, I'm like, this guy's kind of cut from the same cloth of those guys, right? Those big, heavy-handed, physical, run-stopping interior defensive linemen that may not get sacks, right, but he has potential to get some pressure and affect the quarterback, but you're going to have to deal with him in the run game. So that was my first statement. And then the second part is that we talked about the run in the second round. The way this draft class is setting up and you actually think about it, I think that there can be a run towards the back end of the first round, DP, like picks 25 or 24 through 32, because, when you do mock drafts, right, I always bump against like, I don't like none of these picks right here, right? And when you really look at the talent, you like most of the talent is the Kenneth Grants, right, sliding in. We just mentioned DeMonte Capehart. How does TJ Sanders how does he test and how does he, show really well and things like that? Do you get a Landon Jackson, right? And I would consider him a hybrid interior defensive lineman, right? The team just say, we'll draft that guy at 6'6", 265 pounds. So I think the run could potentially happen at the back end of the first round where it could start taking off.
No, 100%. I think, when we look at this class and it being somewhat of a down year, especially offensively, we're going to see more defenders in round one, whether it's corners, we might get a safety. We got to get into the linebacker conversation, because I feel like nobody's talking about the linebackers either. You know what I mean? Especially when you see Edrin Cooper and Peyton Wilson and some of the rookies, that we saw that we liked from the 2024 class showcasing their value at the NFL level during their rookie campaigns right now. Like, yeah, you need those off-ball backers, man. And, I think we got to get into that conversation sometime next week, Keith. I think we're going to bookmark that for next week. But, yeah, I think this interior defensive line group, even when you look at, like with Capehart, like you look at his measurements, he's listed at 6'5", 315, and a guy that got drafted second round a couple of drafts ago, Gervon Dexter out of Florida, was 6'5", 3/4, 310. You know what I mean? And I think, to me, especially run defense, Capehart blows him out of the water in terms of stopping the run as a prospect.
Yeah, no, and I agree. You know who? It's funny that you bring that name up, because I was just watching. I was watching Derek Harmon, And I kept wondering, like, who does he remind me of? And it was Gervon Dexter. Like, that was the name that I came up. I'm like, he because they both, like 6'5", athletic, right? They win with quickness, crossing face, doing different things like that.
Yep.
They operate in spurts, right? As far as, playing against the run and things like that. I was like, man, who does this guy remind me of, like, in past drafts? And then I was thinking, I'm like, Gervon Dexter. I'm like, that's who he reminds me of in this draft class, DP. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. I want to end this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Every listener is greatly appreciated here. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. And you can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube. Wherever you listen to podcasts, get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. On tomorrow's show, guys, on Friday, you know what comes up. Make a statement for Week 10. What players need to make a statement for their 2025 NFL Draft stock? Come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.